Hello, welcome to this recording of me, John, teaching you how to work with the Godot game engine. Okay, in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you the very basic fundamentals of how to get up and running with Godot. I might also show you the very basics of how to get up and running with GitHub and Git repositories. If you're watching this from Design Media, we dove in pretty quickly into some of the deeper ends of what you can do with Godot, although it goes even deeper from there, but we're going to wind the clock back a little bit and take it nice and slow from the very beginning, okay? So I'm going to show you how to get started with the Godot game engine. I'm going to assume that you've already downloaded and installed it on your own computer, but if you haven't, you're going to go to godotengine.org, and you're going to go ahead and click the download latest button, okay? If you're watching this in the future and the latest version is different from what you see on the screen right now, it means that it's still good, okay? Because if there are any significant changes to the workflow or anything I'm going to teach you in this tutorial in the future, I will make sure to update this video, and you'll see different download and install instructions. So if the version is different from what you see, that's okay. Go ahead and download it. There are frequent updates to the Godot engine, so it might be different in the future. And if you get to this page, you're going to want to go ahead and download this blue one, this regular Godot engine, okay? If you're coming from Unity and you want to work in C# in Godot, you totally can do that. I'm not going to be covering C#, but if you do want to use C# in Godot, just go ahead and click this download .NET version, okay? And if you download this version, you can still follow along with everything I'm going to do in the with the other version of Godot, okay? They're both very compatible. But again, if you don't have any coding experience, you don't know what C# is, just download this regular version, this primary version right here at the top, okay? Just like anything else. And once you're ready to go, just launch it how you launch any other application, okay? So I'm just gonna find it, and I'm gonna run it and open it. And you should see this window pop up here, okay? And actually, you know, if you're opening it for the first time, you won't see any of these projects here. Okay, I have a bunch of projects that I've done in Godot, but it should look blank, okay? And you should also be able to click on this asset library, and this will pull up a bunch of sample projects that people in the Godot community have contributed. And what's wonderful about the Godot community is it's an open source community, so lots of people contribute lots of different projects, and it's a very rich and vibrant ecosystem. So if you want any sort of templates for starting things off, you can go and check the asset library. You might need to click support and enable community libraries, and then you can see things from the community. Okay, but for our purposes, we're just going to start a blank new project. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit new, all right? And we're going to be confronted with this pop-up, this sort of new project pop-up, and you have a couple options here, okay? So first thing, you want to give your project a name. So I'm going to call this tutorial project. Okay, and then you want to pick a file path. You know, this is a standard file path. You can hit browse to open up your file manager, and I'm just going to go to desktop, and then I'm going to create a new folder on my desktop and call it I'll call it Godot tutorial. And I'm going to select that current folder, and then you'll see that it says I have created a home/me/desktop/folder. And then in this final choice you get to make, you can choose between 3 different renderers, okay? And in the beginning, you don't really need to worry about that. The easiest way to think about it is Forward Plus is kind of the most advanced renderer for the most sort of cutting edge 3D graphics. Mobile is sort of the middle layer, and it runs on a bunch of mobile devices, as you can imagine. And then compatibility supports the widest variety of different devices. And it also supports web exports, so you can publish your projects onto the web. I'm going to use the compatibility mode because what we're doing today is fairly straightforward. Maybe in future versions we'll do some Forward Plus rendering, but for now we can totally work with the compatibility mode. And then this version control stuff, you can just leave it on Git. That works with GitHub, which I'll explain later. And then once you're ready to go, just hit create and edit. Okay, so once you launch the Godot game editor, you'll notice that there are sort of 4 key areas that are immediately drawing our focus. Okay, we have this sort of, we have this kind of window over here in the top left. We have this window down here in the bottom left. we have this big column over here on the right, and of course we have this big rectangle right here in the center, okay? These are 4 kind of main windows and areas of interaction, and we're going to focus on each of them. So the first one to think about is this viewport, okay? This viewport is sort of your visualizer of what's going on in the scene and the main thing that you're focusing on right away. It starts off in the 3D view, okay? You can see that we're in the 3D view up here at this, on this tab at the top. But if you click any one of these, we'll be switched to a different view. So if I click the 2D view, we'll be switched to a 2D view. If I click the script tab, you'll see that we get this sort of blank screen, which is where you do your code editing when you have code to edit. And then if I click the asset library, we have, again, another instance of a bunch of plugins and assets created by the community that you can look up. And as you can see, there's like a bunch of these. There's like, what, how many pages? Up to 21 pages of 4 by whatever. So there's a lot of different plugins, and they're being updated all the time. So there's lots of cool stuff in the asset library. But I'm going to go back to the 3D view, and I'm going to do a nice gentle introduction on how to navigate through the 3D viewport. So in order to move your view around, if you just click and drag, you'll notice you sort of get a selection dialog. But if you right click and drag, you can start rotating around, okay? In order to move around the screen, you can hold down the right button, the right mouse button, and then use the WAS or D keys to move up, down, left, and right, okay? You can also tilt, and if you sort of tilt and press a button, you'll sort of curve up and down, so you can kind of fly around. It's pretty fun. If you want to go vertically up, you can press Q. Nope, if you want to go vertically down, you can press Q. And if you want to go vertically up, you can press E, okay? And if you want to speed up this process, you can hold Shift, and it's sort of like you're sprinting a little bit, okay? I recommend using a standalone mouse in order to navigate around in 3D and in general with Godot, because you often need to press the right mouse button. And it's also great to have a scroll wheel, because if you scroll, you can zoom in and out. It's pretty handy. So that's how you navigate the 3D viewport, fundamentally. You'll also notice that you have this sort of gizmo thing in the top right, and when you sort of turn or move around, you'll see that it spins around respectively. You can also always grab this and spin it in order to also rotate around. So I'm grabbing the X button here, and I'm spinning around on the X-axis, but if I grab the Y button, I'll spin around on the Y-axis. Something that's notable about 3D game engines is that they have 3 dimensions. They have an X dimension, which in Godot is this red line. They have a Y dimension, which is this green line, and they have a Z dimension, which is this blue line. So as you can see, typically the way it's oriented is X is left and right, green is up and down, Y is up and down, and Z, blue, is forwards and backwards, okay? And if you go to a 2D view, you'll notice that there's only 2 dimensions, right? There is this red X-axis, left and right, and this green Y-axis, up and down, okay? But back in the 3D view, we have 3 dimensions, X, Y, and Z. And if you want to sort of snap your view to precisely along one of these dimensions, you can actually just go up to this gizmo up here, and you can click the button. So I'm going to go ahead and click this Z button, and you'll notice that suddenly it looks very 2-dimensional. And when I'm in this view, if I right-click, I can drag right around this axis without moving it. But as soon as I middle-click and drag, it pulls me out of that view. Okay, you can also you can always middle-click to kind of orbit around. It's kind of confusing, the difference between middle-clicking and right-clicking, but if you can see, right-clicking and dragging kind of tilts you where you are, kind of rotates you around your current position, whereas middle-clicking and dragging orbits you around kind of a focused spot. Okay. But again, back at this gizmo, I can click on any of these buttons to go exactly on that axis. So I can click on this button to go to the z-axis. I can click on this button to go to the x-axis, to go to the x-axis. And now you'll notice that these, right, we see the blue origin, the blue axis instead of the red axis. And I can click on this green button to go to kind of a top-down view of the x and the z-axis. And this might not make a lot of sense because we don't currently have anything in our scene. We don't have anything in this environment. So let's go ahead and start figuring out how to do that. And in order to add something to our scene, I'm going to turn your attention over here to the top left. This is our scene tree panel. And this is the sort of arguably the most important panel that we have in our view. This describes the makeup of all of the objects and things in our scene. And scenes are files with nodes inside of them. And in Godot, everything is composed fundamentally of a tree of different nodes. Okay, that might sound a little confusing, but I will show you what I mean. So in order to add a node to our scene, we're going to go over here to the top left corner. And you'll see that we have these 4 big buttons right here. We have a blue circle, which we can use to create a 2D scene. Okay. We have a red circle, which we can click on to create a 3D scene. We have a green circle, which we can use to create a user interface scene. Okay. Or we can create a scene with another node. Okay. So it's really worth pointing out that in Godot, there are sort of 3 fundamental types of scene. You can have a 2D scene, a 3D scene, or a UI scene, okay? Now, since this is an XR tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and create a 3D scene, okay? So I'm going to click this 3D scene button, and you'll see that it created this thing called node 3D. And you'll notice a couple things have happened when I created this node. Firstly, we have this gizmo, and it's sort of, if we zoom in, it's created this tiny little orange box. You'll also maybe notice that this area over here has also been populated with different properties, okay? And if I click off of it, you'll see that this area is blank, right? But if I select this node right here, you'll also notice that these properties have appeared over here in the right, okay? And if I go ahead and open this up, you'll see that there are some basic fundamental properties that this node has. This node 3D has a 3D point in space property. So it has an X position, a Y position, and a Z position. And you'll notice that if I grab this handle, for instance, and I drag it, you'll see that I'm moving this little orange box along the X axis. And you'll also notice that this number over here in the position is increasing in the X axis, okay? And I'm going to zoom out a little bit further so you can see even more. I'm going to drag it this way, and you'll see that this number goes up sort of significantly, right? And once we get to here, across this line, look at that, it goes up by 1 meter, okay? So that teaches you a couple different things about the Godot Spatial 3D Editor. For starters, if we move along the x-axis by dragging, this number also increases over here in the property. And it also kind of tells you that these squares on the ground are 1 meter apart, okay? So for instance, if I go over here and type in the number 1, you'll see that it adjusts it slightly. If I go over here and type in the number 1 in the z-axis, where do we think it'll go? It's going to go probably somewhere along this z-axis, one spot. So I'm going to type in 1 and hit return. And look at that, it moved 1 meter down the z-axis, okay? And so we've just learned a couple of things. We've learned that we can drag this point along these arrows if we want to change its position, but also if we want to be a little bit more precise, let's say we're trying to get it lined up like exactly on this point, and we see, oh yeah, look, this is almost 0, so you can go in here and you can just type in the number you want. You can type in 0, and it'll be very precise. You can hit return to enter it. You can also hit tab to advance through the fields, just like any sort of user interface. So I'm going to tab over to this one and type in 1 and hit return. And look at that, it snaps it nicely along that axis. And we can also adjust the Y value in the same way. So I'm going to go back to Y, and I'm going to hit 1 and enter, and it moves. It looks like it moved further back, but if we actually rotate a little bit, we can tell that it's moved up into the sky, into the Y axis. Okay. You'll also see that this there's another set of properties down here that this node 3D has. It has rotation properties. Okay. So if I drag this little slider, it looks like nothing's happening. That's because we don't really have anything to visualize to see at this property. I'm going to zoom in and see if we can see it here. Yeah, see, we can see this tiny little this point in space kind of rotating around this property. And it's important to note this little orange cube. This is sort of just, so it's like highlighting the fact that there's a point in space, but really a node 3D is just one invisible point in space, okay? So I'm going to drag this and we can sort of rotate it around the x-axis, and we can go to positive 360 degrees or negative 360 degrees. I'll do the same with the y-axis, so we can rotate around the y-axis, right? And you can sort of see that we're rotating around this y-axis, okay? If I change the view so we're looking above and down at it, we'll see that we're spinning around the y-axis, okay? And similarly, you can rotate around the z-axis. See if we sort of scooch down this way. And actually, I'll show you what we meant earlier, where we can sort of snap to exactly the position. Ooh, it's a little hard to see. That's okay, but you can sort of tell that we are rotating around the z-axis, yeah? You'll also notice that this point in space has a scale attribute, okay? So you can go ahead and make it bigger along the x-axis. I'm going to go ahead and do, say, I'll make it 10 big, and you'll see that it automatically, by default, scaled up the other two axes. It's because typically when we scale things, we want to scale it in a uniform fashion. But if you want to unlink those attributes, just like when you're sort of dragging a picture on a visual editor like Photoshop or Figma or something, and it scales it to keep it proportional, this is the same type of scaling. But if you want to unlink it, you just click this little link symbol, and then we can change each of these scales dimensions individually. And you'll see that we just changed the Y scale down to 1, we changed the Z scale down to 1, and so now we have a really long rectangle that's scaled along the X axis. Yeah? And I'll go ahead and make it back to 1. And if you don't enjoy, some of the edits that you made, let's say you sort of, I did something really weird and I don't like what I did. It's kind of like not what I'm hoping for, right? I don't want this rectangle, I want my regular square again. You can always, with any property of any node, you can hover over the little arrow icon, the circular arrow icon, to reset it to its default properties. So I'm going to click this, and it's going to reset it to a scale of 1, 1, 1. You'll see that it's tiny, and I'm going to reset it to its rotation of 0, 0, 0. And I'm even going to reset its transformation. So I'm going to click this and reset it. And where'd it go? Well, we reset its position to 0, 0, 0. So we can go ahead and go back to 0, 0, 0, the origin of the world. We always call 0, 0 our origin point. And we'll notice that right here at 0, 0, 0, we have our node, okay? And another handy thing you can do if you get lost, right? Let's say I'm like way over here out in space, and I'm like, dang, where did that node go? You can click on it in the scene tree, and then you can press the F key, and it'll zoom the camera right back to where it is. And then you can kind of zoom in and find your node, okay? So we have a node 3D, which is a point in 3D space. It's just sort of hovering in 3D space. That's great, but we want to add more to our scene than just a point in 3D space, okay? We want to add maybe like, I don't know, something we can look at. Let's add something very simple like a box, okay? So what I'm going to do, in Godot, we always see our scenes always have a root node. So this is our root node, this node 3D right here. And then we're going to add a child node to that root node. So in order to do that, there's a couple different things you can do. One of the easiest ways, you can go over here and click this plus icon, and you'll see that it has a child node. It also will pull up a shortcut for you. So if you're on Windows, you can do Control A. I think if you're on Mac, you do Command A. But I'm going to go ahead and click this plus to create a child node. And you'll see, whoa, okay, suddenly we have a whole bunch of different options, okay? We have all of these different options. And actually, it's all kind of this drop-down menu. And what's really important to note is that the root of all of these nodes is this node called node. Okay, that's a lot of nodes in a row. But you can kind of think of one of the fundamental shapes of Godot, one of the fundamental structures of Godot is a tree structure, and everything sort of has a common ancestor, just in the same way that we all have a common ancestor with like bacteria, right? Or that first fish that crawled out of the water that had legs or whatever. You can think of Node as kind of like the great grandfather of all of the different nodes in Godot. In Godot, we make scenes out of a bunch of nodes, okay? So we use these building blocks that Godot has built in that give us different functionality for doing different types of things in Godot. So we can have like user interface nodes, we can have like geometry nodes that show you like your objects on screen, you can have sound effect nodes, you can have controller nodes or AI nodes, you can or you can have different lighting nodes, you can have all these different sort of building blocks or like Legos that you then stick together and combine in different ways to create different scenes. So that's all pretty complicated. This might seem a little overwhelming at the outset. You're like, oh my gosh, there's all these different things I have to learn. You only need to learn the nodes that you want to learn at any given time. You sort of learn them one at a time, and we'll introduce them nice and gradually as we go. So we open up this node, this parent node. There's these children like viewport and canvas item, and then canvas item has these like 3D nodes and these UI nodes and these control nodes. There's a lot of nodes in Godot. So you can look through the node tree sort of by hand to try and find it on your own, but often the easiest thing to do is to just search for it with the name of the node, okay? So I'm going to search for, we came in here to add a box, so I'm going to search for box in here. And you'll notice that we have a couple different options, okay? We don't really want our control. We're not doing a UI tutorial, but we do want a 3D box. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to take this CSG box 3D. And as I said, kind of like the tree of life, you can see that this node has a parent, which is a primitive 3D, and a shape 3D, and an instance, and then a visual instance, and then node 3D. So this box inherits some stuff from the node 3D. And then it also inherits from node itself, so it goes all the way back up the tree. But I'm going to go ahead and select this box and hit create, okay? And look at that, now we have a box. Okay? And you'll notice that the box, as soon as we click on it, this box, it has some properties that appear over here, okay? So it has a size property, which you can set by typing stuff in, and we can sort of make a box nice and long. And I can make it wide or tall, okay? You can also change some of those properties just by clicking on these little circles. You'll notice that we are changing the Z size of it right now. You can just click and drag. And you can make this box kind of whatever size you want, okay? You can also move the box around by dragging the arrows. You can rotate it by dragging on these circles. Whee! And if you want to move it along a specific plane, you can click that little square. So for instance, I'm going to click this blue square, and now I can drag it left, right, and up and down, but it's only moving along the Z axis. See, as I drag it around, you'll sort of notice that it is not moving along the, it's sort of frozen on the Z axis. Sorry, it's only moving along the X axis and the Y axis. Okay, if I drag it, if I click this green square, you'll notice that I can move it forwards and backwards and left and right, but it doesn't go up and down. And if I click this red square, I can move it up and down and forwards and backwards, but it's frozen on the x-axis, okay? You can also always hold Control and drag, and when you hold Control, it sort of snaps it to the nearest nice measurement, basically, the nearest nice unit. It snaps it by, it's rotating it by exactly 100, by exactly full numbers of degrees, okay? And the same is true with these scaling options. You can scale it by exactly 1 meter at a time, as you see, okay? So that's a box, that's great. So we have a box in our scene now, it's pretty cute. I'm gonna go ahead and reset the box, 1, 1, 1. And I will reset its rotation, which, again, as you can see, right, we have these properties from these nodes. These are the sort of different nodes that we've inherited from. And so just like our regular base node, how our regular base node has a transformation property, our CSG box also has a transformation property. And it's down here. So I'm going to open up this tab. and I'm going to reset these properties. So I'm going to put it back to 0, 0, 0, and I'm going to reset its rotation, okay? So now we have a box that's pretty close to a scene. Why don't we try and figure out how to actually like make this scene run? Like let's say that we've finished our game or our XR experience and we want to play it and we want to see it happen. Okay, so in order to do that, all you need to do is go up into this top right-hand corner, and we use this panel up here, okay? And most notably, we're going to click this triangle. This runs our project, okay? Now, when we do this, we get this dialog pop up. If we've never done this before, it says, no main scene has been defined. Select one. So let's select our current scene to be our main scene of the project. So I'm going to hit select. And because we haven't saved our project yet, it is now asking us to save our scene. So I'm going to go ahead and call this scene main. In all caps. You can call it whatever you want, but if it's going to be your main scene, it's kind of handy to name it main, okay? And we're going to see that we're going to save this main.tscn right here in the root folder of our project directory. So I'm going to hit save, and you'll notice that right over here, we popped up this main scene. And we also had this gray window pop up, okay? What's going on? Now, this gray window is the output. This is our actual game. And you might be saying, okay, hold on a second. Why does this gray window not look at all like this beautiful scene that we have with our cube and our sky and our ground? Well, that's because when we work in 3D, we have to add a couple more things to a scene in order for the game to render it properly. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this by clicking this X. You can also stop it by clicking this little stop sign up here, or pressing the shortcut. The shortcut on Mac, I think, is Command period, and on Windows or Linux, you can press F8. Okay, so I'm going to stop it, and I'm going to add some things that are going to help us render this scene. Okay, in 3D in particular, one of the most important things you have to add to any scene is a camera. Okay, and if you're doing an XR scene, you're going to do an XR camera, but we're going to start nice and simple and just do a regular 3D, like for a video game or a real-time render or something. And in order to do that, we need to add a camera. So I'm going to go ahead and add another node to the root of my scene. I'm going to call it C-A-M-E-R-A, camera. And look at that, we have our camera and our XR camera. I'm just going to add camera 3D, and then I hit create. Okay, and you'll notice that we now have this this purple little triangle right here, and we also have these little pop-ups right here, and we have this object right over here. I'm going to click on this object, make sure it's highlighted, and then I'm going to move my camera back a little bit, because what has happened is it has spawned in the sort of middle, right at the origin at 0, 0, 0, which is also where our box is, so that's not a very helpful starting place. But I'm going to move it back here. And what I'm also going to do is I can click on this preview to sort of take a peek at what my camera sees. This is my view from the camera right now. And you'll notice that if let's see, I'm going to move it to on the x-axis a little bit, and I'll preview it again. And you'll see that the cube is moved a little bit to the left or the right. And then I'm also just going to rotate the camera a little bit. I'm going to drag this circle to rotate it that way, and I'll take a peek at it one more time. And we'll see that that cube is kind of on a cool angle. That's exciting. I like that. So in order to render anything in 3D, we always need to pick a place to look at it from. We need to have a camera, right? Because the camera takes the 3D scene and flattens it down to a 2D image and then pops it up onto the viewport to render. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play now, and we should be able to see our scene. Okay, that's closer. Right, we can sort of see that there is a cube, but we don't really have any background, and the cube is all in darkness. Okay, what's going on there? Well, in this environment that we're previewing the scene in, Godot does this nice thing for us where it kind of automatically gives us a light source to look at things from, and it gives us a background environment to compare our objects against. And if you want to turn those things on or off to see what the camera will actually see, you can go up here and toggle them. And now we've turned off the lighting, and we've turned off the background. And now, as you can tell, right, it looks a lot like the scene that we just saw, okay? So in order to get our scene, to look more like this, there's a nice little shortcut we can do. We basically need to add 2 more nodes to our scene, 2 more building blocks. We need to add a background or a world environment, and we need to add a light source. So if you click on these 3 dots, we can edit our preview environment, okay? And you'll see that we have some fun options that pop up right away. We can edit the sky color. That seems like the most fun thing to edit right out of the box. You can just drag this slider around to change the sky color of our preview environment, okay? Then you can also change the ground color. But something that you can do really quickly with this menu is you can then just add the environment to the scene. So when I click this button, you'll notice that we have added a world environment to our scene. And now, if we toggle off this this light source, in theory, our game, when we run it, it should look kind of like this, right? So I'm going to hit play, and there we go. We have a scene with a cube, okay? But I did like having a light source. You know, it's nice to have some shadows and contrast. So I'm going to go up here to this tab, and I'm going to play with this other thing too. This is our sun. This is our directional light. And we can change the color of the sun right here with this tab. Okay. And we can change the angle, and we can sort of see it changing on the cube right there. We can change the energy of it. But I'm just going to have a nice plain sun with a regular angle. And I'm going to add that to the scene. And now you'll see that we have 2 extra nodes. We have our world environment, and we have our directional light 3D. And we've added them both to the scene. So when we hit play, lo and behold, we have a cube that is lit up in the world. That's incredible. Okay, now that we've added this cube to our scene, I think it's probably a good moment to talk about scenes in general in Godot. Okay, so a scene in Godot is just a file in your folder, and if we right-click here and open our file manager, you will see over here that we have our project.godot file, and we have our main.tscn, our main scene file. And if we just open this with a regular text editor, we'll see that our scene is just it's just a plain text file with some information in it. We can kind of see all the different aspects of the scene. We have our sun in here with the properties that we specified. We have our environment. We have our camera with its position, and we have our node, we have our box. So a scene is just a file with information in it, and a scene is also just a collection of nodes, okay? And we can use scenes in Godot to create all sorts of different compositions. So a scene can be a level with a bunch of objects in it, and enemies, and characters. But a scene in Godot can also be smaller components, like individual objects or entities. That's getting a little abstract, I know, but let me give you a concrete example, okay? So firstly, I want to build out this, this level a little bit, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and add I'm going to add a ground to this this parent node. I'm going to add a child node. I'm going to add a CSG box, okay? Here we have another box. We have 2 boxes now. But I'm going to go ahead and make this one the ground by making it really big. So I'm going to go to the X, and I'm going to make it maybe like 100 units big. And I'm going to go to the Z and make it 100 units big. And I'm going to go to the Y and make it nice and small, maybe like 0.5 units, okay? And I want it to be a little bit lower, so I'm going to grab this Y axis, and I'm going to hold Control and drag down a little bit, and it'll pop right below the origin, okay? So now we have this nice little ground. And as soon as we start adding things in our scene that actually mean stuff, we should probably give them appropriate names, okay? So I'm going to go over here to this ground object, and I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to give it a good name, like ground. And in order for it to be more of a ground, let's give it a nice ground color, okay? In order to give something a color, we need to give it a material. So I'm going to go over here and click material, and create a new standard material. And in 3D rendering, we often have geometries which are shapes, and then they're covered in materials, which are sort of like the texture, the color, how rough or bumpy it is, how the light bounces off of it. So every object in 3D needs to have a geometry and a material. So we have this box geometry, which we're going to give a material now. I'm going to click on the material and open it up. Then I'm going to go down to albedo, which is basically just a fancy word for color. And I'm going to click on color and change some of these sliders. I'm going to make this maybe like a dark brown for ground, for dirt. And so scenes in Godot can be, scenes in Godot can really be anything as long as they are a collection of nodes. And we use scenes compositionally. And what I mean by that is we make scenes and then we put them inside of other scenes. And by combining them all together, we make even more complicated scenes. So like a very practical example of that is, let's say we wanted to make a forest. Well, you might have a whole forest scene. And inside of that forest scene, you might have a bunch of different tree scenes, okay? So let's go ahead and make a simple example of that so you can understand what the heck I'm talking about. So right now we have this main scene, and I'm going to call this our forest. So I'm going to go to our main node, and I'm going to rename it forest. And in our forest, we have a world environment, we have a sun, we have a ground, and I'm going to go ahead and make a tree now. So I'm going to turn this box into I'm going to use this box as our base to start making the tree. So I think a tree wants to be nice and tall. Okay, that's good. And maybe a tree wants to be, I don't know, the trunk wants to be brown. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a material, a new standard material. And in order to edit that, I click it and open it up. And I go down to albedo, and I change the color to brown. Brown. That's nice and brown. That's a good tree trunk. Now let's go ahead and make like a tree, some leaves on the tree. I'm going to go and add another child node to our forest. I'm going to add we can probably do it with a cylinder, actually. I think we can make a little pine tree. Check this out. We're going to create a cylinder. I'm going to drag it up a little bit. Doink, doink, doink. I'm holding control to make it snap. Then I'm going to click this cone option, boop, and it's going to turn it into a cone. Now I'm going to make it wider by changing the radius, and I'm going to make it taller, boop. And I'll make it even wider. And it's looking now like a little, an octagon because it has 8 sides. But I can just make it a big circle by giving it a bunch of sides. So I'm going to add maybe 64 sides. And then that looks like a nice circle. Then I'm going to give it a material. I'm going to go to a material and create a new standard material. And again, I open it up and I go down to albedo. And I'm just going to make this nice and green by obviously turning down the red and the blue. And then if I unselect it, look at that, I should have a pretty good tree. I think that's not too bad in terms of trees. But here's the thing, right? We have this tree trunk. I'm going to rename this trunk. And I'm going to go ahead and rename this cone. Oh no, that's the cone. These are the leaves. I'm going to go ahead. We have these leaves, and then we have this trunk. But as you might notice, these are 2 separate nodes, right? And so if I want to move our tree, I'd have to move this node, this trunk, and I'd have to move this leaves. It's not a very good way to do it. We want some way to group these things together, right? We want to nest them together into a thing called a tree. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new node in our forest, a child node. And I'm just going to use a basic node 3D for this, just a regular point in space. But I'm going to call this tree, T-R-E-E. And I have this tree node, which is this point in space, and I'm going to take my leaves, and I'm going to drag them onto my tree. And I'm going to take my trunk, and I'm going to drag it onto my tree. And now you'll see that I have this sort of little parent. This parent object has these children of a leaves and a trunk. And now when I click on the parent, the whole thing gets selected, and I can drag it all around all at once. I can rotate it all at once. I can move it all at once. I can even go over here and scale it all at once. And I can make the whole tree really, well, let's relink it. I can even scale it all at once, and I can make the whole tree super big. That's pretty cool. So it's really important to know about parents in Godot is our scenes often have parents and children, and all of the properties of the parents get applied to the children. So if I change the rotation of the parent, it'll also trickle down and impact the rotation of the children. Okay, if I still want to make like my trunk nice and small, let's say I want to edit the trunk and make it smaller, you can click on the trunk and change, you can change its properties. Like, let's make it nice and short, or, well, let's make our trunk super skinny. There we go. And you'll notice, right, we just changed our trunk without changing our leaves. But if we want to change the whole node all at once, we can change its parent properties, and those trickle down to impact the children. And that's a really, really powerful feature of Godot, is this idea that parents influence their children, okay? Now, we said we were going to make a forest, right? So let's try and make a forest really quick. Well, one thing that we could do, we can just highlight it and we can duplicate it by doing Control-D. And you'll notice that we now have 2 trees. And if we drag it out, look at that, there's 2 trees right there. And we can do that again. And we can do that again. And we can do that again. That's a pretty good way to do it. But, you know, let's say if we want to change something in all of our trees. Let's say we want our leaves to be like a little bit taller. You'll notice that if we click on these on the leaves of this particular tree, we're only editing these leaves, right? We're not actually editing any of the other leaves. So in order to change them, we'd have to like change every single leaf by hand, which can be pretty tedious when you have a lot of objects in a scene, right? Or when you have a whole bunch of different things in your game. So this is where the idea of a nested scene becomes really, really valuable in Godot, right? There's a much easier way to make a whole forest full of trees, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to delete all these extra trees. Goodbye. Delete. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and right-click on this tree that I already have. And I'm going to go down and click Save Branch as Scene. And then it pulls up our file saving menu. And it already knows the name of the scene we want. It just grabs the name of the node. And I like the name of this because we're making a tree scene. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Save. And you'll notice that we have 2 files in our file directory, right? And if we go back to our file directory, you'll see that we have our main scene and we also have our tree scene, okay? And if I open up this tree scene, you'll see, if I double click on it, you'll see that we just have this tree right here hanging out. It's only the tree. Nothing else is in the environment, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and edit this tree from within this scene. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the transform. And I'm going to reset it to 0, 0 so that it's at the center of its own scene. Okay, I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to make these leaves taller right here. So I'm going to click on these leaves and I'm going to drag it like way up. And then I'm going to drag it way higher. And I'm going to save this scene. And now you'll notice if we go back to our main scene, it's already updated because it has loaded that file. So the last really quick, cool thing you can do with scenes is once you have a scene, you can duplicate it very easily. So I'm going to do Control-D and Control-D. And you'll notice now I have 3 trees. And this is very similar to what we just did, where we had a bunch of trees on their own. But what's great about this is they're all referencing the same scene file. You can get to that scene by clicking this little movie clicker, this movie icon, movie reel. And that opens up the scene file itself. And now if I make any edits to this scene, if I make it short again, and save that. When I go back to my main scene, you'll see that it updates them all at once, which is really, really powerful. And I'm just going to make a forest really fast. I'm going to duplicate all these and rotate them and drag it out. And I'm going to duplicate them all again. And it's not the most elegant forest. Oops. It's not the most elegant forest, but it is a forest. And I'm going to take my camera and drag it up and out. And I'll preview it real quick. That's not exactly what I want. Let's take a look at it again. Yeah, and that's a forest. I'm going to hit play, and now you can see your forest full of trees, okay? Okay, so yeah, this looks pretty good. We have a forest full of trees. I'm going to do another basic example. I'm going to expand this a little bit by maybe adding some rocks to our trees, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is clean up our scene structure a little bit. I'm going to create a new node called trees. So I'm going to click on forest. Then I'm going to hit Control A to add a node. I'm going to type in node 3 and then hit return to get node 3D. Node 3D, I'm going to call this trees without a slash in it, of course. Then I'm going to take all of these individual trees and I'm going to drag them into the trees node. So I have trees and then each tree inside of it. And what's nice about that is I can toggle this little triangle here and I can hide all of these tree objects, okay? And again, as we said before, the parent node always controls the properties of the children nodes, okay? So with all of these trees, I can take them and move them all around at once. And what's actually nice about that in this case is I think that these, yeah, you can kind of see that these trees are all sort of floating off the ground a little bit. So I'm just going to take this whole tree node and I'm going to grab this, this vertical arrow, and I'll actually show you. I'm going to snap the view along the axis. Remember how I said we could do this earlier? This is an instance where it's really, really helpful. So I'm going to click here to click the Z button. Well, you can sort of see that the trees are clearly floating above the ground, so I'm going to drag them down onto the ground right there. And it's just nice to be able to see precisely where things line up in some axes sometimes, okay? But I've gone ahead and dragged it now, and you can now see that the trees are nicely right touching the ground, okay? Another thing that I'll show you while we're here is the ability to hide and show various elements in your scene, okay? So if you notice over here, we have this eyeball. If you click this eyeball, we're going to toggle the visibility of it, okay? So I'm going to click this eyeball, and you'll see that all the trees have disappeared. Now, they haven't been deleted, right? You can still see that there is this square highlighting the whole area where they exist, and you can open this up and see them all in this menu below. They've just been hidden from view, okay? So you can toggle their visibility off and on. This is a great way to sort of make things quickly appear and disappear in your scenes without having to load them and reload them, okay? I'll also toggle the ground, you know, make the ground disappear. I can toggle the sun off and on. It's a great way to sort of quickly preview things appearing and disappearing in your scene, okay? But I said I was going to make a rock scene, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and I'll show you a new way to create a scene. So I'm going to go up to this scene menu and go and hit a new scene. You can also hit Control-N on Windows or Linux, or if you're on Mac, I believe it's Command-N. So I'm going to hit New Scene, and we're confronted again with this blank object stuff, okay? And, you know, I said before that we have these 3 basic scenes. You can definitely create a 3D scene, but it's worth it to point out that any node in Godot can be the root node of a scene. So I'm just going to go ahead and click this other node right here. And now I'm going to search for the CSG shape that I want to have be my rock. So I'm going to type in CSG. And I think that I will, for the sake of easiness today, I'll just make our rock a box, okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and do another box 3D, okay? I'm going to make it kind of on an angle because, you know, rocks are kind of fun on angles, I guess. And I'll give it like a little material as well. I'll give it a new standard material. I'll open it up. I'll open up albedo. I'll click on color, and I will pick a nice gray color. Okay, and I will even actually show you guys. Let's see. Let's get a nice gray color. That's kind of brown. Yeah, that's nice and gray. That's a nice kind of gray color. Let's say we want this to have, we don't just want to have a color though. Maybe we want to have like an actual rock pattern or texture. That's actually pretty easy to do as well, okay? I'm just going to go to a web browser and search like rock PNG texture. PNGs are great image files to work with, okay? They just work really well in game engines. And I'm just going to grab something simple like this. That seems nice. I'm going to do copy image. And then I'm just going to go over here into the file manager and I'll just paste it. I'll just paste in the image file and I'll rename it rock. Okay, so I have this rock PNG file in the folder of my Godot project. And then if you notice over here in Godot, it quickly, as soon as you add anything to the project folder, it'll import it automatically in Godot, okay? So now we have this rock texture, and you can double click on it and see it sort of appear in the resource editor over here. I'm going to go back to this scene and click on my CSG box. And you'll notice right here in the albedo section, we have a color folder property. We also have a texture property that's currently empty. And you can create all sorts of blank textures. You can use any sort of, there's a whole bunch of different types of textures you can do, but one of the easiest things to do is just take the image file from your file browser and drag it over here onto this property. You can also even just drag it onto the image itself, or onto the object itself. So I'm going to drop it onto the object, and there we go. We have a pretty weird looking rock, but I kind of like it. So I'm going to save this rock now. So I'm going to do Command or Control S, and it's going to prompt me to name this scene. And this is actually a good moment for me to remember that it's always good to give my objects in the scene good appropriate names, right? I don't just want this to be CSG box. I want it to be called rock. So I'm going to call this scene rock. And then I'm actually going to go over to this node itself, and I'm going to rename it and call it rock, R-O-C-K. Okay. And I'll save the scene. Now back in my main scene, I'm going to create another child node. So Control or Command A. I'll do just a regular node 3D for this one. And I'm going to call this rocks. And this is going to be the node that I put all of my rocks inside of. And then you can take the scene from the file inspector, the file system, and you can just drag it either into the scene directly, and you can even just position it around the world, which is kind of fun. Or you can take it and you can drag it right here into the scene tree. And that's nice because I can already just drop it right into as a child of my rocks node. When you do that though, it's important to know that it spawns the object at the origin, which you don't necessarily always want. So it can be nice to just drag them into the scene. So I'm going to just do that a couple times. Boop, boop. You can also duplicate them, right? Control or Command D to duplicate. I'll spin it a little bit just to make it look kind of offset. Boop. And I'll just make a couple more. I'll highlight all of them. I'll do Control D. And then I'll move them along the plane like that. That's kind of fun. Now I have a bunch of rocks in this scene. And the final thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these rocks, put them as a child of this rock node, and then I will go and click on this parent node, and I'm just going to move them below the ground a little bit so that they look a little bit more like rocks. Okay, again, it's super weird, super basic, but it does have a nice little kind of retro effect, okay? And again, all this is to really illustrate a couple of key fundamental concepts, right? The idea that everything in Godot is a scene, and every scene has a parent node, has a root node at the very top. And then the root node has child nodes, and you can have as many children as you want, okay? And you can also nest scenes inside of other scenes, okay? So this rock scene, right? This is just one scene, and if I click on this little movie file, we'll see that we open up the scene. And again, you can always change the scene itself. So I'll make this like a little taller. Boop. Taller. And I'll save. And then when you go back to your main scene, you'll see that they have all been updated to be tall rocks, right? So anytime you change a scene, Any instances of a scene, that's what this is called. This is when you load a scene into another scene, it's called an instance of a scene. So every time you change a scene, any instances of that scene also get changed. So it's a great way to be able to update things in your projects and have that carry over to all the times that you have them loaded in, okay? Now that is a lot to cover today, okay? So we're gonna pause there. I'm gonna transition to show you how to save this all into GitHub, but I just want you to play around with those fundamental concepts and let that sink in, okay? And I will see you in the next tutorial. Okay, this is a PS to the tutorial. I'm going to show you how to work with GitHub to be able to save your projects onto the internet and to download other people's projects from the internet. GitHub is a code hosting platform where all sorts of different code and projects are shared by developers around the world, and it's a great way to work with your code both with other people, and it's a great way for you to share your project between different devices. If you're working on a laptop at home or computers at school, it's a great way to be able to ensure that you have the same version of your project saved on a bunch of different platforms. So I'm going to show you the basics of how to get up and running in GitHub. So if you come to GitHub for the first time and you don't have an account, you might get a page that looks a little bit like this. You're going to want to go over here to sign up, okay? You're going to get this nice little prompt. I'm going to enter in my email. Okay, and continue. I'm going to create a password, which you are not going to see. Once you create a password, you then enter in a username. I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. I hate product updates, so I'm not going to get any of those. And then you have to verify your account, okay? So I guess GitHub wants me to solve a little puzzle. And it's pretty confusing. Use the arrows to rotate the object to face in the direction of the hand. Cool. That seems good to me. Submit. Great. I'm glad I'm not a robot. I was worried for a minute. So now I'm going to go ahead and create my account. Okay. And of course, you're going to have to verify your info. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. 587-926-68. 587-926-68. 587-926-68. Okay. And then, oh my God, I'm getting blasted off into the future. Why is this happening? That's wild. That's a wild choice for software, but here we are. Here we are in GitHub, okay? And so now you sort of have this whole dashboard that looks a little bit overwhelming. You can just close any pop-ups that you don't want to see. So the way GitHub works is you have a profile, and on your profile you can have repositories, okay? What do I mean by that? Here's my profile, JBzark. I'm going to go to my profile, and you'll see that there is sort of a history of me and all my stuff. And when I have repositories, you'll see them appear over here, okay? If I click on this tab up here, I can go to repositories. You'll see that I don't have any public repositories. Let's change that. I'm going to create a new repository, okay? And a repository is sort of like a project. It's a bucket of code, of documents, of whatever you want. You can have anything hosted on GitHub. It's really just a way to organize files and share them on the internet. So I'm going to click New, and I'm going to make a new repository. I'm going to call this intro Godot GitHub repo. Repo is short for repository, and I can add a description, an introduction to Godot and GitHub. And you can decide whether or not you want your code to be public or private. For this course, I recommend keeping your code public, at least while we're in class. It's much easier to share your code when it's public. If you're really passionate, though, about protecting your code and keeping it private, you can make it private. You'll then just have to share it. You'll have to invite me or other class members to the projects specifically. But again, if that sounds a little complicated, it's easiest to just keep things public, okay? So I'm going to make a public repository, and I'm going to just go ahead. You don't need to, you can add a README file. A README file is just a sort of a blank markdown document where you can sort of add information to your project. And I'm going to go ahead and give a, these are the copyright licenses that you can give to your files, and it's worth it to dig through those at your own leisure. But the MIT license is a pretty nice, good open source license. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and then hit create repository. And you'll see that I now have this repository created, okay? And it has a license, the license that we added. You can open up the license and read it, okay? This is the text of the license itself. It also has this README file in it, which has the title of the repository and the description that we wrote in. And if you want to edit this file, you can just click on this little pencil up here to edit this file. And I can add some text to it, okay? So I'll say, wow, cool text. And then I'm going to commit changes. Now in GitHub and in Git, you always need to save your work and then commit those changes to the repository. Commit them to the Git history. Okay, so in order to do that, you click on commit. And you often need to have a Git message where you describe what you've changed. So I updated the README. And you can add some even more text if you want. I'll say, I wrote a nice sentence. And this might seem like overkill if you're just doing this, you know, to goof around in the way I am, but it's really helpful when you're collaborating with other people, or even if you're working on something that you're just working on by yourself, but you're doing, you know, a very large project that's taking a long time. It's really nice to write these little messages and descriptions because you can always go back and look at all of the changes you made in the past, and having a little bit of a title and a description of what you did helps you remember, or helps your collaborators understand the edits that you've made to your code or to your repository. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit commit changes. We'll talk about branches later in this series. But for now, we're just going to commit directly to the main branch, okay? So I'm going to hit commit changes. And you'll see now at the base of our project, right, you'll see this README, we have updated this file to include the sentence that we just did, okay? Now that's pretty cool. That's a pretty good way to edit text and things online, but let's try and figure out now how to actually like add some real files and add some real code to this repository so we can actually share our Godot projects, for instance. The best way to do that is to use the GitHub desktop app. Okay, so I'm going to search for GitHub desktop, and you'll see that it comes right up when you Google it. I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to download the version that's right here. Okay, if you're on Windows, this will pull up Windows. If you're on Mac, it'll pull up Mac. And then once you're ready, you can just once you've downloaded and installed that app, you can just launch it. And it'll prompt you to sign in with your account info. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do sign in. The easiest way to do it is to sign in with the browser. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and continue with browser. And then it's asking me to authorize this desktop app. I'm going to go ahead and hit authorize. That sounds good to me. And then if everything goes smoothly, it should just automatically sign you into your account, okay? When you're fully signed in the desktop app, what you can do is go to File and then do Clone Repository, okay? That's going to look for repositories in your account and add them to your local computer, okay? So I'm going to hit Clone Repository. And you should see all the repositories that you have created so far, including the one that we just did. Okay, so I'm going to hit. I'm going to select the repository, and then I'm going to choose a path on my computer to clone the files to. Okay, That means basically you're going to pick a place in your computer to save the files to. And you want to be pretty specific about this because if you ever move those files around on your computer, you're going to have to relocate them in the GitHub desktop app. And it's kind of a pain. So when you're doing this step, just save them to a spot on your computer that you think is a good, nice, permanent place. So for instance, me, I'm going to choose, I hit choose, and it pulls up this little browser. I save everything in this work folder, teaching folder, and this SVA folder, and this design media folder. And I'm going to go ahead and create a folder right here and call it intro Godot GitHub. And I'm going to save it into this folder right here. Okay, open. And you'll notice that when you do that appropriately, it should create a folder, right? A folder structure, and it adds the name of the repository into a folder at the very end. Okay, and then all you have to do is hit clone. Okay, and now it doesn't look like anything has happened here, but if you hit show in file manager, we will see that in my computer, right, I have this folder and it has the license and the README. Okay, and if I open this with a text editor, we'll see here is the text of the folder, or of the README that we edited online, okay? And what's cool about GitHub is you can use any programs you want to edit any files you want. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this and add a line that says new edits. And I'll just save this file and close this. And when you do that, you'll notice if you go back to the GitHub desktop app, it's going to show you some changes that have happened, right? You'll see that we have deleted the old edits and we've created some new edits. So it's prompting me to update the README. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave this blank. If you leave this blank, it's going to give this description automatically, okay? And I'm going to say I made some edits. And then I'm going to commit to the main. And then, after you commit, you need to push to the origin. So I'm going to go up here and click push to origin. And basically what that means is, right, when you commit to main, that is sort of committing changes on the Git, in the Git system on your local computer. But then when you push to origin, that is sending the changes to GitHub, the website, so that it can get the latest updates. So I'm going to click push to origin. And you'll notice that little blue thing went away. And now I can click view on GitHub. And if we look at the code on GitHub, we'll see that it has the edits that we just made. Okay, and what's really cool about Git is you can always see the history of all the changes that have been made. So if you click on commits, you can see these three versions. So I can click on this version, and this is sort of what the code looked like at the very beginning when we created our repository. If I go back and click on this update, we can see the just the changes that we made, right? We added some text at the bottom. And we also added a period. And then if we go to the final version, we can see how we deleted that old line and we added this new line. This is a really great way to track the changes that you make to files and the edits that you make to them as you work on them. Okay, so the final thing I want to do is I just want to add our Godot project to our GitHub repository, okay, so I can share it with all of you. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to show the files in my file manager. Okay, so this is my GitHub repository. Then I'm going to go find the Godot project that I saved earlier. I'm going to go find it on my computer. Okay, so I'm going to make a new file browser window. Okay, and again, it's worth pointing out I'm using Linux right now, so this might look different from your computer, but it's the same process whether or not you're on Windows or Mac. Okay. So I saved mine to my desktop, so I'm going to go to Home, and then Desktop, and then here is the folder, okay? As you can see, here's our rock, and our main, and our rock scene, and our tree scene. So this looks pretty good. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to take this whole folder, and I'm just going to drag it over here into the folder that is my GitHub repository, okay? Then when I go back to the GitHub desktop app, you'll see that we added a whole bunch of stuff, right? We created all of these new files, okay? Then in order to put them onto GitHub, all I need to do is give it a summary, okay? So I'm going to say add Godot tutorial project, and I'm going to give it a description. It's got a rock and a forest. And then I'm going to commit it to the main and then push it to the origin. And then if you go onto GitHub, you will see that there is the folder with all of the Godot files in it, okay? And what's great about that is it's really easy to share this now, okay? So you can, this is a public web page that anyone can go to, so you're just gonna wanna copy this link. And if you're doing the lab assignment, I'm gonna want you to share this link with me, okay? And then if you wanna see somebody else's code on GitHub, all you need to do is click on code, and you can either hit download zip, or you can open it in the GitHub desktop app, okay? So we're gonna pause there. I know this GitHub stuff might be a little bit confusing, but it's really good to start practicing it to get your feet wet and to sort of understand a little bit of the lay of the land. There's plenty of other really good resources on how to learn GitHub, particularly Dan Schiffman's GitHub for Poets is a great, gentle introduction if you want to learn more about GitHub. And I hope you sort of enjoy dabbling around in Godot and GitHub, and we'll see you soon.